not going to watch any more videos following from that one. So as you can appreciate, there's lots of different scenarios that we're going to face or that you might come across as you work together in your teams. Is anyone here doing an individual assignment or individual group, individual project? There's always one. You will have your own battles within yourself, okay, that you will need to overcome, and you will need to discuss, obviously, with your client. So although you're doing a project on your own, you will still have some challenges that you need to overcome because you are working with others, I'm assuming, to deliver a project for someone else. So regardless of whether you're working by yourself or whether you're working with others, you still need to communicate, you still need to interact, you still need to overcome challenges, and you need to focus on your strengths and or weaknesses, and perhaps identify your strengths and or weaknesses and work together as a collective unit to overcome those challenges. So teamwork is essential, communication is essential, and I've preached it many times. You need to communicate, okay? Be open, be clear, be honest with your communication with your team members. How do you achieve that? We'll come up with a team communication plan. Again, hopefully I'm refreshing your memories because we've covered some of these things, and I preached, I spoke, I lectured, whatever you want to call it, back in first year, and I mentioned to you that some of these things you will be encountering when you need to apply them in your final year. Well, now, welcome to your final year. Team communication plan. Has your team had its first meeting? Has anyone here not had their first group meeting yet with their team members? You can be honest, doesn't matter. Hands nice and high. Okay, all right. Something you need to think about. When you're going to have your first meeting? How are you going to communicate as a team? What methods do each of you prefer? What methods will you use as a team? Have you exchanged contact details? There is a document template available on the course website. And again, maybe a familiar document because I have shown it to you. I did use it back in first year in terms of how you're going to communicate. If you don't know how to communicate with your team members, if you don't know who your team members are, ignorance is no excuse, okay? Because the mechanisms are there. We all use social media. We've all come this far, so you really need to be in touch with your team members. Doug, do they all know who their team members are? Yes, so everyone knows who their team members are. So it's week one, but really it's well into week one. These are the things you need to be thinking about. So the template is, I believe, available on the course website in terms of team communication plan. The other thing is a team charter that you need to be thinking about, setting the scene for your team. What's the focus? What's the direction of your team? What is your team actually trying to achieve? What boundaries are you going to establish? Invest some time in filling out that team charter document, okay? Because it's really like a binding document, a binding agreement that you are going to come up with in terms of how you are going to work as a team. Set your objectives, set your rules. What's going to happen if this scenario occurs? How often are we going to meet? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What roles are we going to take on working together in this particular project? And again, that document template is available on the course website. So think about setting the scene, think about who's in your team, think about the ground rules you are going to set for how you are going to work to successfully achieve the outcomes of this project that you have been tasked with. Okay, that's setting up your team. In addition to that, you need to be able to have excellent planning and project management skills, which I know you all have. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. Okay? Planning is critical. Planning is essential. Planning is of utmost importance because before you know it, it's going to be week 3 and you need to submit something at the end of week 3, which is only 20 odd days away. Not that I'm trying to scare you or anything, but it's not that far away. And the following week, you're all going to have to present something. So you really have to hit the ground running with these projects. There is no real slack time, okay, because time does really move really quickly. I won't play this, but I'll get you to, if you're interested, play it in your own time. So it gives you a bit of a good sense of why projects fail and gives you some examples of how projects can potentially fail. So what do projects do? Okay, again, reiterating some stuff I've already talked about a couple of years ago for some of you. Introduces new things. It's a complex one-time process, okay? Each of your projects is unique. Doug doesn't reissue projects every study period, and we don't get everyone to do the same thing. It may have a similar context, it may be for the same client, but there's going to be a different objective and a different outcome. Each of your projects has a defined start and an end. You are limited by a budget, schedule and resources. Some of you don't have a budget to work with, some may have a specific budget. Resources, what are the different types of resources that I'm referring to when I say resources that we're limited by? Can you give me some suggestions or ideas? Yes. Time, resource, time, yes. What other resources? People resources, absolutely. Any other resources? Well, not any, there are other resources, but what other resources can we potentially have or not have in a project that we may need to source? Specific skills, absolutely. Technology, excellent. So again, that's a few things that we've already spoken about in terms of resources. So you may be limited by particular resources, which is going to potentially impact maybe what you can deliver to your client. But unless you know and understand what resources you have, you can't make that judgment call. So the project that you are working on is being developed to resolve some sort of clear goal or a set of goals for your client. It does involve people from different fields. Do any of you have multiple clients? No? Do any of you have multiple people that you're potentially reporting to within an organisation? One show of hands. I'm sure there may be multiple shows of hands once you perhaps have established what you really need to achieve in your project, and potentially once you've met your client, they may engage you to speak to other people as part of what is required for your project. So although you may have one client, you may be liaising with multiple people. Remember, it's about the customer, okay? It's not about you. You are delivering something for your customer, and your customer needs to be satisfied with the outcome of what you are delivering. And you are representing yourselves, you're representing your qualifications, your skills. UniSA, you're representing a whole gamut of experience that you're bringing to the table to represent what you're going to produce as the outcome of your project. So there's lots of different examples of IT projects, and the types of projects that we have every study period vary from study period to study period, but as I'm aware, we have a high range of networking and gaming projects this study period. Okay, just because of the nature of the types of projects that we need to source and what you guys are studying. So you could be developing an app. Might have some projects removing old servers or developing sites or updating infrastructure, networking your home, systems migration, disaster recovery, lots of different types of projects. Some of these may fit into the category of the type of project that you are doing. Some of them may not. Okay, we obviously can't come up with every single combination. But in terms of looking at a particular project, every project has a life cycle, okay? You need to think about initiating, thinking about scoping your project, which is what Doug briefly mentioned. What do you need to actually achieve as a deliverable for your project? What does the client/customer actually want to receive at the end of week 13? What do you need to achieve not only to satisfy the customer's requirements, but to satisfy UniSA's requirements? Okay, so there are a couple of things going on in this particular project course that you are working towards. Providing deliverables to us so you can satisfy our requirements, as well as providing some sort of deliverable for your client. And they may be aligned perfectly, there may be some differences in what you're trying to achieve. So scoping is really important. You need to plan your project. You can't stress the importance of that enough. What are the goals? What are the objectives? What are the deliverables? Plan your project schedule. Okay? How can we schedule a project? What's a tool that we can use to visually represent our project schedule? A Gantt chart, that's one of the tools. There's probably quite a number of them out there. but a Gantt chart is an excellent example. Okay, a visual representation of how long you have, and you do have a fixed timeline. You know what that timeline is. You know when the start is. You know when the finish is. Work out the scope of your project. Work out your milestones. Work out your deliverables at the end. Work out your interim deliverables, and use those to come up with a pretty succinct, as much as you can, project schedule. Okay, to determine what needs to be done, when it needs to be done by, and more importantly, who needs to do it. Because it might not necessarily be everybody working on everything. You may be providing tasks to certain people in your group because of the skill set that you have to work on different aspects of that project. You need to identify the risks, okay, potential risks for the project that may or may not surface throughout the project. But you need to understand the potential risks, you need to identify those risks, and you need to identify how you are going to act and react should those risks occur. So think about if you're developing software, a development life cycle, if you're developing a networking type of project, what is the actual cycle that you need to follow to complete your project from start to finish? Executing, what sort of executing do you need to do? This is basically based on a software development life cycle. The majority of you aren't doing that, but you still need to do some sort of development and some sort of testing, regardless of the project that you're working on, okay? And some sort of implementation, regardless of the type of project you're working on. Monitoring and controlling, okay? Who's monitoring the project? Are you all monitoring the project? Who's controlling the project? Who is taking the lead? Does anyone have the role of the project manager within your team? Okay? And what is their role and what is their responsibility? If you feel you have that natural ability and that natural quality to take on the role of the project manager, let your group know. So look, I'd like to be the project manager. I'm comfortable, I'm confident with taking on the lead, I'm really well organised, I think we can work together as a group, blah, 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 blah. I'd like to take on that role. If not, then as a group, as a consensus, determine who's going to take on that role. And then you need to close the project. Okay, so all of these things need to be done within a fixed schedule. You need to think about the goals and the objectives of the project. The way we like to identify goals and objectives is looking at the SMART acronym. I'm sure that you've come across this particular acronym in one or many of your courses in your degree to date. So you need to have or follow this particular SMART goals guide, where your goals need to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant and time-bound. These slides will or are on the course website, will be or are on the course website, so you can refer to these after today's lecture to have a bit more of a guide, or if you need a refresher in terms of what I've talked about today. So an example is a software company have decided they would like to increase sales in their organisation. The SMART objective is we want to increase market share to 3.5% in 15 months. Okay, so we've got actual figures here to stipulate what the objectives actually are in terms of being specific, measurable, attainable, relevant and time-bound. Okay. How do we document requirements? Regardless of the project that you are working on, you need to document your requirements. And we will be looking at, or you will be looking at, documenting your requirements from two different levels. The first one is the business requirements point of view, which is the high level. Other terms or other ways that, or other forms of naming convention for this type of business requirements document you may come across is often called a project charter, a business case or a business requirement document. Okay, that's really aimed at the high level. The other one is the system requirements. Okay, so it could be called a system requirements specification, SRS, SRD, or a functional requirements specification, FRS or FRD. So two different views of documenting requirements tailored at two different audiences. So the business requirements really specify what is required and why it's specified, or why you're doing the project basically. Clear, and it's typically aimed at the very high level. Okay, so targeted toward the senior managers within the organisation or someone with a senior role as part of the clientele that you are working with. And it's written from the point of the view of the client. So you need to think about the business goals for the organisation or for the client and the expectations of the stakeholder and or stakeholders that you are working with as part of your project. Once you've developed those business requirements, so what are the objectives of the business at the top level, at the high level, then you can burrow down, work further to come up with your system requirements or your network requirements or whatever. Okay, we're talking about system as a holistic thing in this case. So the system requirements tell us what, in addition to the business requirements, what we're going to do to get there. Okay, what do we need to do to actually achieve the objectives of this particular project? They are specific, they are detailed. We need to break down the steps to specify what we are actually going to do to meet the requirements of the business or the organisation or the client that you're working for. So that's targeted toward the staff and the low-level managers. And it's written from the point of the view of the system, which I'll talk about more when I go through systems analysis. So again, just a bit of an analogy or a scenario in terms of if you get it wrong. There are different forms of this particular scenario here in terms of the way the icons are drawn, but the first one is how the customer explained it, how the project leader understood it, how the analyst designed it, how the programmer wrote it, how the business consultant described it, how the project was documented, zip, what operations installed, how the customer was billed, how it was supported, and what the customer really needed. Okay, so we've got lots of people involved, we've got lots of potential team members involved, we've got a number of stakeholders involved, and hopefully you can appreciate just from these images how things can be misinterpreted and misunderstood and misrepresented, which is why it's really important and why we are asking you within the first few weeks to really knuckle down and tie down what the requirements for the system are and to have them documented. Why? Because it's important for you to know what you are doing in your project, but it's important to know that what you've understood is actually what the client wants and vice versa. It's important for the client to understand what they're going to be getting and that they've conveyed that information to you and that you've represented that information in written form so that everybody's working to achieve the same outcomes and the same goals. Okay? Clarity, communication. All right, let's reiterate some of the systems analysis activities. So we have some core processes. However, the systems analysis activities are basically represented here where we gather the detailed information, we define the requirements, we prioritise them, we develop dialogues and we evaluate the requirements with the users. Okay? Evaluation is key and critical to make sure that, again, what they've said to you they want is what you've understood that they want. Because sometimes customers don't necessarily know what they want until they see it written or visualised or verbalised from someone else's perspective. So this is now where you are going to put into practice the things that I talked about in the beginning of your degrees. Okay? You need to gather detailed information, and you don't have 6 months to do it in. You've probably got a week or two to do it in, because in week 3 you need to document it all and specify what you've found out that you need to actually do in your projects, if you haven't established that already. So you need to potentially conduct interviews, questionnaires, observe business processes, look at documents within the organisation for the client that you're working for to potentially establish what their current scenario is or what their current business problem is in order for you to be able to move forward to provide them with the outcomes of the deliverable that they've asked for. You may need to research vendor solutions. Okay? Has your particular multimedia project been done by someone else? Is there an off-the-shelf solution that can help you achieve the outcomes of what you are trying to achieve? Is the network infrastructure that you need to develop for a particular high school, for example, already been successfully developed for another high school that you can perhaps learn from them in terms of what they've done to be able to implement that in your current scenario? So thinking about what's currently being done, if you have access to those resources to assist you with your current situation. And again, obtaining comments and suggestions from as many people as you can to gather that information. So we need to define the requirements. You need to prioritise the requirements. You need to also develop dialogues and evaluate requirements with the users. So what do we mean by system requirements? So these are the requirements that the system must perform, or thinking about the constraints and what the new system or network, whatever the project must meet. So we need to think about functional and non-functional requirements. Again, I just want to qualify some of these things I'm referring to may or may not be applicable to your particular project, every single section in these documents. But regardless, you're still going to have some sort of requirements. Okay, your customer, your client wants something done, regardless of what it is, whether it's a network, whether it's a website, whether it's an app. There are going to be some sort of requirements. So just because you're not developing a system, don't think, oh, this is not applicable to me, because there are still going to be requirements that have to be specified from your client to you, and you need to document those requirements. So we've talked about the FERPS Plus requirements acronym, where there are different types of requirements: functional, usability, reliability, performance, security. Regardless of the type of project, these are all relevant requirements that you need to think about in terms of developing your projects. And again, just providing you with some summary slides to refresh your memories in terms of the types of requirements that you should be thinking about when having these conversations with your clients and when preparing your document for submission and presentation in the up and coming weeks. How to represent those requirements. So your functional requirements can be grouped into categories for users of different parts of the system. And we need to specify them by saying the system shall, and then you number your functional requirements. So by the end of your documentation, you all should know how many requirements you need to obtain or achieve at the end of your project. Not only will you know and understand what you need to achieve, the client will also know and understand what they're going to receive as part of the outcomes and the deliverables that you will provide to them. So hopefully you can appreciate that by specifying it in this format, it provides clarity for everybody involved within this particular project. Similarly, with your non-functional requirements, you can group them into categories for the different types of non-functional requirements, or again, by users, potential user groups. Okay? And again, the system shall, and labelling your non-functional requirements as NFR, and numbering them in terms of 1, 2, 3, etc., etc. So again, you've got a clear and coherent set of requirements that need to be met for this particular project. Prioritising requirements. Why do you think we need to prioritise requirements? Why would you want to prioritise requirements and not give everything the same priority? Do you think? Yes? Okay, so I'll just repeat that for the sake of, for the recording. The client might have specified some requirements that they particularly want you to focus on. Okay, so the client might actually give you some sort of ranking or priority in terms of, I want you to get this done first, or this is of utmost importance for you to achieve this, then you can work on the other things. Why else might we want to rank our requirements or prioritise requirements if the client hasn't specified any sort of priority? Yeah, you've all got a time restriction. Customers generally want everything. Clients want everything. Can you do this? Oh, but can you do this as well? In a few weeks' time, they might say, oh, you know how we spoke about that thing? We really want you to incorporate that as well, since you're doing such a fantastic job. Can you do that as well? Well, no, we can't. Or yes, we can. Or yes, we've actually incorporated that into what you asked for. Okay, so at the beginning, it's really important. There's going to be potentially a large wish list from your clients, which you may not be able to achieve within the bounds of your project. Doesn't necessarily mean you shoot them down and say, no, we can't do that. No way. You can potentially have a ranking system and a priority system where you liaise with your client and say, okay, these are the requirements. This is what we understand that you would like us to achieve. Can we prioritise those requirements in terms of certain criteria, so we can then decide what we feel is realistically achievable within the bounds of the project and the resources that we have to carry out what you want. And the way to do that is using the Moscow method for prioritising your requirements, where we have a must-have requirement, should have if at all possible, could have but not critical, and would be good to have. Won't have the time to do it now, but maybe later. Okay? Because remember, just because your project is over, it doesn't mean it might not be taken up by another group or another individual. So having that list of requirements and prioritising those requirements using the Moscow technique or method is a really good way of ensuring and understanding what you can get done realistically. And so the client understands what they will receive at the end of the project. If things are going fantastic and you can achieve the could-haves and some of the would-be good to have, a credit to you and a credit to your team, and even better for the client. But unless you create that prioritisation, you're not going to know what's going on, and stress will kick in, deadlines will pass, the client will be stressed, you'll be half finished with some of your requirements, you'll think you need to achieve everything, and before you know it, it's week 11 and you have to submit your final documentation in week 12, and you think, oh my God, this has been a complete failure, which is not what we want to see. Okay, which is why I'm providing you with these mechanisms to help you plan and clarify what you need to do as part of your projects. Information gathering techniques. Okay, have any of you met with your clients yet? Okay, we've got one. Okay. Have any of you planned a meeting with your clients as yet? Do any of you not know who your client is? I'm really glad no one put their hand up, or no one's volunteering to put their hand up. So by now you should at least know who your client is. Have any of you, and you can put your hand up for this one, I'm not going to criticise you or judge you, have any of you not made contact, some sort of initial contact with your client yet? Okay, that's fine. Okay. That's one of the first things I think you need to prioritise. Okay? Meet with your client. Make contact with your client. Set up a meeting with them. Know what you're going to do. Because you don't know when your client is available, and you have a UniSA deadline to meet, where by the end of week 3 you need to provide this documentation to us. And if your client is overseas for the next 2 weeks, how are you going to overcome that challenge? If you can't meet with them face to face. Sorry? Nice and loud. Don't panic. How are you going to overcome that issue? Skype. That's one way. Okay? You're all IT students. You're all familiar with tools and technologies and social media and every other piece of technology that's available out in this lovely world that we live in. Think about the ways you can communicate. There are ways we can virtually communicate. Okay, there are ways you can communicate with your clients if you can't necessarily meet with them face to face. Some of you may even have clients that are not even located within South Australia. We've had project groups working with clients in Mount Gambier, rural or remote areas, or even interstate. Okay, so you need to find out how you're going to communicate with your team members as well as how you're going to communicate with your client. You may need to have interviews, okay? Questionnaires. Again, look at the documentation within the organisation. You don't necessarily have to use every technique. We are providing you with the tools and the techniques that are available to help you succeed in your project. It's up to you and your group members and your team to determine which is the best method of gathering the information required to be able to successfully initially document the requirements for your project and then to carry out your projects. Some tips again for preparing for the interview. Again, I'm just providing some refresher materials because I know that you haven't got systems analysis sitting on the top shelf of your bookcases or project management sitting on the top shelf of your bookcases, if at all. So you may want to dust the cobwebs. You may want to log into your course websites again to gain access to the content. If not, you can use these materials as a refresher. Things to think about before and after your interview. Again, be professionals. Present yourself well. Articulate yourself well. Not, hey, how you going? Or, hey, can we have a meeting? Hi, my name is such and such. I am blah, 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 blah. I'm excited and looking forward to working on this project. My team members are blah, 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 blah. When can we possibly meet? Okay? Not, hey, can we have a meeting next week? Professional, okay? Professional, professional, professional. Again, a sample questionnaire, if you need to come up with a questionnaire to provide to some of your stakeholders involved in the project. And again, a bit more information about what you need to do in terms of reviewing outputs and procedures and some additional techniques that you may need to, I guess, invoke throughout this project. So the requirements for the initial deliverables, okay, is the final part of today's presentation. Okay, so hopefully I've given you some things to think about. I've given you a lot of things to think about. Hopefully I haven't raised your stress levels too much, but hopefully I've got you thinking that, yes, you can't be complacent and you really need to get the ball rolling. So what do you need to think about for your initial deliverables? So the project types that you are all working on, again, as I said, can vary, whether it's a website, an app, a game, some sort of analysis or recommendation document, or some sort of networking project. Each has their own specific and relevant deliverables. And we understand that and we appreciate that, which is why we've come up with some template documents based on the different types of projects that you're working on. Because no two projects are generally the same. Okay, IT is IT, but there's different aspects of IT, okay, as I'm sure you all appreciate. So we don't expect you to all come up with one vanilla document that looks exactly the same, which is why we've tried to come up with variations to help you with what you need to provide in terms of your documentation. So again, as Doug mentioned, the project timelines do vary. As I understand, the majority of you are doing a 9-unit, 1 study period project. Am I correct in making that primary assumption? Yes? And that you're all going to be graduating next year? Yes? Yes. Hopefully, yes. So the deliverables will vary depending on your project timeline, but the majority of you, again, 1 study period, 9 units. So it's the equivalent of 2 courses. Again, don't fool yourself into it's a 4.9 course. It is the equivalent of 2 courses, half of your load for the study period. So the 1 study period, 9 units, 1 submission per group. You need to submit the ICT requirements document as per the template provided on the course website. Okay, the due date, can you remember the due date? Doug did mention it in that schedule. End of week 3. Okay, again, I've put C course outline, so I don't get the blame for putting a date on there, and I've left the responsibility and the onus onto you to figure out when it's due. So you don't come back to me and say, but you said it was due in week 3 and Doug said it's due in week 4, etc., etc. So I'm pleading complete ignorance. I'm saying see your course outline or see the course website in terms of what you need to submit and when you need to submit it by. But I'm sure you need to submit it via Learn Online. Yeah, okay, I got that one right. So that's safe to assume. What other initial submissions are there? Okay, you need to have your presentations, okay, due date of when you need to submit the slides. Again, have a look at the course website or your course outline. Understand how you need to submit those slides, but be wary that you need to present in week 4. Okay, that's a given. Okay, everybody needs to present in week 4. And I'm sure Doug will speak to you about those presentations in more detail in the up and coming weeks to give you a bit more detail about those presentations. Anything else? Okay, the journal entries, which Doug mentioned. And what else? You mentioned something else. The journal entries, the meeting minutes, and presentation feedback. Okay, so there's lots of things going on that you need to be wary about on a weekly basis. So in addition to actually trying to do a project, we want you to submit all these lovely documents. To make sure that you are on the ball, to make sure that you are here, to make sure that you are listening, to make sure that you're engaging, to make sure that you are understanding what you need to do, okay, and providing details every week. Okay, again, see your course outline and make sure that you follow the course website, okay, religiously to see what you need to do and when you need to do it by. Do not fall behind. As Doug said, he is checking timelines of what has been submitted and when it's been submitted. Okay, it's not a case of, okay, I'll do 10 weeks worth of journals at the end and I'll get marked off. That's not going to happen. Okay, this is a real world project where you need to be engaging in your project, engaging with your team members, engaging with the content on a regular basis and proving what you are doing and what you've done to demonstrate that you are actually being a positive contributor towards your team's outcomes. Similarly, if you're doing an 18-unit course, which there's probably not many, if only one of you, again, similar document with different deadlines, and again, see your course outline. So let's have a look at the initial deliverables template. And again, there are a number of them on the course website, and there are also some examples on the course website. Dr. Doug, is it SIS requirements? No, it's not. Yeah, but today we're talking about system requirements. Designs in week 5. We'll go there in week 5. We don't want to overwhelm you too much. All right, so these are some example documents, okay, that Doug has placed on the course website. And did you say these are distinction and or high distinction quality? Okay, so these examples here, we've got a gaming, couple of networking ones, some software ones, some web ones. That one, okay. Doesn't surprise me. All right, so this is the SRS template, which we can ignore the number 7 and make it number 8. There's no way you're going to be able to read it because it's so small. But this is the document template that we've come up with to assist you in terms of completing the first submission that you need to be thinking about for end of week 3 and presenting in week 4. So we've got a declaration of contribution, okay, for each of your team members. A table of contents, okay, and the table of contents we've pretty much filled out for you, so all you need to do is update it once you've included your information. So as I talked about, there's business requirements and there's system requirements, okay? I said there's two different types of requirements that you need to think about. We want you to provide some business requirements with an executive summary, the project purpose and justification, the project description, which talks about the objectives and success criteria, any requirements, constraints, assumption and a preliminary scope statement, the risks, the deliverables of the project, a summary milestone schedule, a summary budget, if there is one, project approval requirements and project manager responsibilities and a project management plan and any authorisations. Now hopefully some of these headings sound familiar to you because we've done a lot of these in your IT project management course when you had to work on your group projects, for those of you that did do that course and did deliver a group project. So that's the high level for the management side in terms of what the project is setting out to do and deliver. Then you come down to the nitty-gritty, which is system requirements, where we want a use case analysis, functional requirements and non-functional requirements. Okay, and for each of these you can be specific towards what your project is working on. So we've given you some instructions of how to update the table of contents. We've also within each of the headings given you some information to help you with what is expected of you in terms of what you need to provide in each of those headings. Okay, so where you need to place your text, what you need to delete, what we want you to talk about within each of those headings. Now again, each of these headings should be applicable to each of your projects. It's when I'll come back in week 5 that your projects may deviate in terms of what you need to provide in your final documentation. But for all of your projects at this point in time, you're all going to have some business requirements and you're all going to have some system requirements, which is why we've got the one document with all the same headings. Okay? Yes? Sorry, can you repeat the question?
We need to get the client to approve the requirement for the meeting.
Well, absolutely. In terms of what you need to be doing for the next 2 to 3 weeks is clarifying those requirements with the business, with the company, to ensure that what you are going to deliver is what you've agreed on with them. Because it's this particular document that is really your baseline document, and it's what we are going to be asking you to think about and reflect on when you have to submit your final deliverable in terms of, did we actually achieve the outcomes of what the business actually wanted? So now's the time where you need to be having lots of conversations and really knuckling down in terms of what the business or the client actually wants and documenting them here. And by all means, once you've done this document or got some sort of draft, flick it over to them and say, look, this is what we've understood. This is what we need to submit as part of UniSA's requirements. Are you satisfied with what we have specified here? And if not, then you need to have many conversations backwards and forwards. But yes, there must be an agreement. You can't just make it up and add a few more things or take things off, because that's when we have disgruntled clients that say, look, this project team, we wanted this, this and this, and they've actually chopped off half of what we asked for and they've given us this, this and this. So yes, absolutely you need to get some sort of consensus amongst your team and with the client. This is basically where you are just documenting it really. Okay? Did I say anything else you want to add for that? I think this is basically it. This is where you write it down. Yep. Now, some of you may be working with clients that have some sort of confidentiality clauses, or they may have another type of document that is slightly different to this document that they want you to fill out. We don't expect you to fill out 15 different documents, A, to satisfy your client, and B, to satisfy us. If the client has said to you, we actually have a document template that we would like you to fill out as part of your project, it's at that stage I would ask you to then liaise with Doug and say, hey Doug, hi Doug, hi Doug, we're all friends here, hey Doug, our client actually wants us to use this particular template. Is that going to satisfy what you need from UniSA's perspective? And if the answer is yes, then you fill out the client's document that they want you to fill out. If the answer is no, then you need to negotiate with Doug in terms of what is adequate in terms of reporting purposes for the client's requirements, as well as marking documents for the project requirements. So again, this is a guide. Okay, it's not set in stone, it's a guide. If you feel there are headings that we've missed out, or if you feel that there's information that is slightly different or varied, again, communicate, have conversations, clarify what you are working on. Don't just take things out, because as I said, we've worked really hard to come up with this particular document in terms of coming up with a clear and coherent set of what the business needs and what you need to actually develop from the client's perspective and your perspective. So again, just some information to help you work out what you need to do on this particular template. So here's an example of a network. Is there any particular one that you can't remember them all? Come on, why not? All right, we'll do network. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, low latency audio visual streaming system. Sounds exciting. Pretty recent. Okay, it was done August last year. Okay, you can see the table of contents hasn't really changed. Okay, so they've stuck with the requirements. Okay, but you can see here the functional requirements and the non-functional requirements. They've got camera, computer, network, non-functional, usability, performance, other. So again, it's within some of these sections that you can tailor those sections to satisfy what you are doing within your particular projects. Does that make sense? Okay, but again, shouldn't be taking anything out. And again, these are not here for our benefit, they're here for your benefit. Okay, again, we are wary of plagiarism, so no copying and pasting. Okay? But use them as a guide to help you come up with what you need to deliver. And again, you'll see that they're pretty sizable documents, they're pretty significant documents, but you can't just make this stuff up. You need to have conversations with your client. You need to have conversations with your team members. You need to set up meetings with your team members. You need to do all those things I've talked about for the last hour or so in terms of communicating with your team, communicating with your client, planning your project, setting up your team for success, because you have things that you need to be working on at full pace. And I think it's great that we have these on a Monday, because then I can crack the whip from the Monday and say, okay, this is day one. From tomorrow, I've given you hopefully a pretty hefty to-do list of things that you need to be thinking about in terms of, you know, kick-starting your projects, which is the aim of today, kicking off your projects. So again, hopefully these examples that we've provided you really give you sufficient background and detailed information in terms of what you need to be thinking about in terms of clarifying the requirements for your project and delivering something that's really achievable and fantastic at the end in week 13. Okay, and going out into industry and providing this is a really good example and a real world example of something that you have achieved as a group and as an individual in terms of delivering a real world project to a client. And you never know, that client might be so impressed with what you've done, they may offer you employment at the end, which we have seen in a number of cases. Okay, which is why I've stressed, you know, be professional. Okay, be diligent, communicate effectively, present yourself well, Because you never know, that might be your next employer, or they might know your next employer. And if you don't set a good example, oh boy, how quickly communication can spread, both good and or negative. Okay, so look at these examples to help you come up with what you need to deliver. So that's a networking one. We've got a plan, authorization, in terms of who the sponsor is. Oh, look at that. Can you remember what that is? Yeah, because you saw it, set it down the bottom. No, you didn't remember. Good work. Use case diagram. Yeah.
What's missing in the risks?
Where are the risks? Up. Is that risks?
One more. Yeah. I think it's that risk.
Yeah, that's just a... Okay, what's missing in the risks? Risk assessment. Risk register? Yeah, a register matrix, yeah. So not only do you need to list the risks, but there's a risk matrix that you can come up with. What is the risk? What is the likelihood? What is the impact? How are we going to mitigate the risk should it occur? Okay, so there's more information that you need to provide, which is why we've given you examples. Don't just look at the one example. Look at...
It'll cost you marks.
It'll cost you marks, potentially. Look at all of the examples. Look at what we've talked about. Look at the things you've done throughout your courses and say to yourself, is that sufficient? Okay? Or have I seen something better? Or have I seen something presented in a different way that's clearer, that provides that next level of information? Okay, so use these as a guide in terms of how you produce the information that you're going to produce. And I'd like to see a Gantt chart potentially as well. Okay, I think that's a good representation. So a couple of things that we've picked just by flicking through this particular example. Okay? Again, some diagrams. Okay, I like these. They've got the system shell and they've got the functional requirements. They've got the functional requirements based on various aspects. Okay? For the camera, for the computer, and for the network in this instance. Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to say. And I've talked about, and I'll reiterate, the numbering should keep incrementing. Okay, so it shouldn't start at 1 each time you have a new heading or a subsection. You should know by the end of it, in total, how many functional requirements you have. So that should be FR 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, etc., etc. Okay, NFR 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so the numbering needs to keep going up. So again, just by flicking through this, we've picked up 3 things already where improvements can be made. And some references. Okay, so that's, again, just one example. There's a whole raft of examples there, and hopefully enough examples there to give you a feel for what we are expecting of you, okay, in the first stage of your projects. We don't want to overwhelm you with the whole lot of requirements, which again is why I'm coming back in week 5, because by then you would have had the weekend to recover and de-stress after having submitted your initial documentation and having done your first lot of presentations. And knowing where you've come to date, and then I'll give you some more tips and clarify what we then expect you to be doing from week 5 onwards. Okay? Any questions from anyone at this point in time? Any major concerns from anyone at this point in time? Apart from being stressed, because I've given you a whole lot of work to do. Okay, one comment. I know Doug does ask for feedback from all the presentations at the end of each week, day. I don't know, how mean are you? When do you want them to...
Oh, Wednesday.
Well, okay, Wednesday. There you go. You've got a couple of days to think about it. We do appreciate and value your comments. I update these presentations on an ongoing basis, if and as necessary. So walk away from today and ask yourself, do I know what I'm supposed to be doing? Or have you got any niggling questions or glaring questions of potentially something that we haven't addressed today? Okay, so we want you to go away leaving today really knowing what you should be doing from tomorrow onwards for the next few weeks. And if you feel that we haven't satisfied or answered any particular questions, add that to the feedback so we can incorporate, those things on a rolling basis. I mean, for example, last study period, some of the students did ask for examples of the requirements document. So we incorporated that, and I've gone through that today just to give you an idea of the look and feel. So if there's something you feel that you would have liked to have seen as of today's presentation, please let me know, so we can always aim to improve and help you guys succeed. That's what we're here for, to help you succeed. All right. Any questions of Doug or from Doug, or I'll stop for now. I think Doug's happy to stop for now.
Yep, we'll have a break and then
We'll
I'll
have
read the right act.
Yeah, well, okay, have a break and then he'll read the right act.